On the mystical land of Ireland, where mist drifts through the deep green valleys like the soul of the Mother Earth, there is a lonely mountain rising in the middle of the south of Ulster Slievegullion. There the wind whispers legends that have passed quietly for centuries, and every rock, every water, here holds an ancient memory. Among the legends that haunt people's hearts, there is a sad, melancholy, but tender story about a great warrior, an enchanted lake, and a fairy whose eyes seem to reflect the moonlight. This story begins with a seemingly harmless hunt and ends with a curse of time. Today, when night falls and you are looking for a soothing dream, let me tell you the legend of the moon goddess by Slievegullion, a story that may make you reflect on youth faith and the cost of being fascinated by things that are too beautiful to be real. At dawn, soft mist, like a white silk ribbon, floats over the deep green hillsides of Slievegullion. The space was submerged in silence, only broken by the hooves of horses and the cheerful laughter of the hunting party led by Fionn Against the pale pink-orange sky of dawn, the first rays of sunlight shine down on the dewy branches, reflecting the crystal-like glitter of light on the forest foliage. The fresh, humid air smells of wild herbs and pristine mountainous soil. The group of horsemen went deep into the forest, where the trunks of ancient trees grew close to each other like ramparts, and the intertwined foliage covered the sky. The sound of wild birds chirping like a natural choir, blending with the sound of the wind, whispering through the branches, creating an ancient symphony. Sniffing hunts rushing through the bush, and the long and squeaky sound signaled the start of a promising hunting day. But unlike the usual hunts this time, there was something strange in the air. Fionn felt an invisible attraction, as if the deep forest was calling his name. And then in the distance, strange traces appeared, pale white streaks of light, almost moonlight imprinted on the ground, and rocks as if someone had passed by with their feet barefoot. Other hunters don't seem to be paying attention, but Fionn, with his keen senses and soul attached to nature, can't take his eyes off. Raising his head, he saw that the moonlight was still floating in the sky, even though the sun had risen. A rare phenomenon, the faint moonlight still holds its position in the middle of the day, as a sign from another world. Going deeper into the forest, the air becomes unusually dense and quiet. The birdsong stopped completely. The wind is calm. The whole forest seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, from a narrow gap between the two ancient tree trunks, a pure white deer appeared. He stood motionless, his eyes staring straight at Fionn. No fear, Fionn raised his hand to stop. His heart pounded in his chest. The deer seemed to glow in the mist, a creature that did not belong in the human world. Then, as if hearing a call from another plane, it turned around and ran gently into the deep forest, leaving behind a faint trail of white light like moon dust. Irresistibly fascinated, Fionn tied the horse, and once he followed the trail, the other hunters did not see him return during lunchtime, and they began to search separately. But the forest seemed to change shape. The trail disappeared, and the strange pale light still silently led the way. That was the moment when the line between reality and dreams began to blur. When Fionn finally crossed a dense grove of trees, he arrived at a land that had not been marked on any map. A deep, hidden valley surrounded by steep cliffs and ancient moss-covered trees. In the center, a mirror-like calm lake. The daytime moonlight still shines on the surface of the lake. Despite the sun shining, It is here that his fate will take an unexpected turn. On the shore of the calm lake, where the water was as bright as a mirror, reflecting the misty sky and the ancient foliage swaying in the gentle breeze, Fionn stood still. Silver rays of light creep through the leaf crevices, pouring down on the surface of the lake, like vague silk strips, creating a dreamscape. On the surface of the water, each petal of a wildflower floats gently, as if someone has just spread it down to welcome a special guest. And then she appeared. From the middle of the lake, where the water seemed to split in half in a hazy mist, the fairy stepped forward. Every step she took did not disturb the water, as if she was walking on a dense moonlight. That beauty does not belong to the human world. Her long silver hair fell like a waterfall, moving gently with the breeze glittering in the moonlight. Even though it was daytime, her face was delicate to the heart. Her forehead was high. Her eyes were deep in color, hiding an eternal sadness, as if she had witnessed centuries pass. Her lips were pale pink, slightly curled as if holding a whisper that had never been spoken. Her skin was ivory white, almost transparent, emitting a faint light. Her every movement is as soft and slow as flowing water, flexible, elegant, unencumbered in bare dust. On her forehead was a faint halo of light, not a crown, but a fragile aura, as if the moon had printed a picture of herself on it. Beside her, small birds, all as white as snow, flew silently, and then landed on willow branches weeping around the lake. The fish in the water did not swim away, but gathered silently watching her, as if listening to a wordless hymn. The scent of lavender and wild apples wafts in the wind, bringing with it a strange sense of nostalgia and peace. The scenery around the lake seemed to blend into her rhythm. The trees calmed down, the waves stopped, and even the sound of wild birds fell silent. The space seemed to stop breathing. Time seemed to stop flying. Fionn was no longer a strong warrior, but a child in front of a miracle. His heart slowed down his chest, heavy with an unspeakable emotion. Admiration, surprise, or love? I don't know. He only knew that from that moment on, he couldn't turn around. The fairy stretched out her hand, gesturing as light as the breeze. Not a word was spoken, but Fionn heard the call, not through his ears, but into his heart. A vague call like the lullaby of heaven and earth. That lake with its surreal beauty and a being that does not belong to the world is the place where destiny awaits him to enter. And when he took a step forward, every way back was sunk behind the mist. Fionn followed the fairy into the middle of the lake, where the water seemed to become thick like liquid silver. Ripples melted beneath his feet, reflecting the stars, even though the sky was still bright. His heart was beating quietly, not out of fear, but by a vague premonition. He was entering a place beyond all the laws of the world. In the middle of the lake is a small island that is not on the map, a piece of land that only appears when the moon is at its fullest, and the moonlight shines directly into the mountain. On the island is a small stone house covered with silver vines and moss. It was here that the woman Cumhaill was waiting. No longer the beautiful young woman she was at the beginning. She transformed into an old woman with silver-burning eyes. No fire, no water, but the light that saw through time. Fionnmaccumhaill. She said not to name, but to seal fate. You have touched the taboo, the heart of Ine, my sister, the goddess of summer. She said, her voice as quiet as an old breeze through the forest. You and she, two young and brilliant men have played with the delicate balance between season and time. You bring the sunshine in the middle of the winter night. That's intolerable. Her hand raised an ancient stone cup, mossy and engraved with Ogham characters. And this is your sentence, a century in an instant. Before Fionn could react, the liquid in the cup was poured out and touched his lips. It was bitterly cold, like a river from the afterlife. And then the pain began. Not the pain of the wound, but the silent rupture in each cell. His skin was receding. His dark black hair turned white in just one breath. His knees were bent, and his back was bent down, as if he had been carrying a century. The tendons echoed with dry sounds. The face that used to be majestic now collapses into the wrinkles of time. Fionn looked at the water, no longer the image of a legendary warrior, but the figure of a strange old man. His eyes were still bright, but there was something unspeakable about them. Terror, suffocation, and pain. That's the price of challenging winter, Cumhaill said, his voice echoing like the sound of ice breaking in the middle of the night. Your youth, her light. It all distorted the wheel of time. And now I've turned it around. The wind rose not violent, but as cold as the wind of the grave. The leaves whisper as if whispering old secrets. The surface of the lake rises surrounding Fionn, as if sending him out of a dream. But it was in that cursed moment that Fionn saw more clearly than ever in Cumhaill's eyes. In addition to judgment, there was sadness. Did she herself know how to love? She had lost, and now only the power of punishment remained as a companion. When the lake became quiet again, only a gray-haired old man was left to step out of the water with eyes that had seen both heaven and hell, and nothing was the same anymore. When Fionn walked from the lake to the rocky shore, he was no longer Fionna's illustrious leader, but a thin old man with white hair and gloomy eyes. The armor was soaked, and the heavy cloak seemed to drag the shadow of time. The whole heaven and earth seemed to calm down, and even the wind breathed softly Fionna's warriors, brothers who had stood with Fionn through many battles, were stunned when they saw him. A person was about to draw his sword, thinking that this was a stranger in disguise. But then it was those eyes. The eyes that had led them through the fog and red fire that silenced all. Oisín. Fionn's voice hoarsely called his son's name. The young man who was as proud as a tiger in the forest was now choking, kneeling beside his father. Is it a person? Oisín asked, his voice not daring to believe. Fionn nodded slightly and only replied, Time have replaced me. They don't need any more words. The young warriors walked over, kneeling around him no longer, like soldiers before their leaders, but like descendants before their ancestors. The scene was so quiet that the sound of falling leaves could be heard touching stones. The story he tells about the fairy, about the lake, about Cailleach, and the curse is told not as a legend, but as a concern from a man who has seen the boundaries of eternity. Fianna, the invincible warriors, did not shout, did not cheer, but silently accompanied him to his old base. Along the way, the villagers on both sides bowed their heads quietly. No one recognized the old man as Fionn every day, but the old people who had seen him in old battles were in tears. As night falls on the top of Slievegullion, a flame is lit, not to celebrate, but to commemorate. They do not mourn a deceased person, but admire a person who survives through the incomprehensible Fionn. Old slowly sat by the fire. The light shone on his wrinkled face. but there was still a dull glint in his eyes, the glow of someone who had loved. Lost and faced the very flow of time, Slievegullion was silent, as if holding the secrets of those who had reached the fantasy realm and returned. With strength and pleading, they forced Cailleach Beara to break the curse. But it couldn't be completely. Fionn's youth was returned, but his hair remained as white as his mark forever. He no longer chased his dreams. After that incident, Fionn became quiet. Every year he returns to Slievegullion on a moonlit night, standing silently by the lake, as if listening to a piece of music that only he remembers. As time passed, the image of the old hero sitting quietly at the top of Slievegullion gradually faded in the memory of the world. But the story of him of the Moon Fairy and Cailleach's curse never disappeared. It is told by the fires of the night under the thin moonlight of the Irish hills as a sad love song of time and fate. People around the area say that on full moon nights, especially when the fog is thick on the lake surface, a figure can sometimes be seen sitting quietly on the rocky outcroppings along the shore. No one dared to approach. It is said that it is Fionn, still waiting for some magical moment for time to return to youth. It is also said that it is his soul. It is impossible to leave the place where love and pain converge. No matter how the story ends, it is not just a human tragedy, but a symbol of the fragility between the eternal and the temporary. Fionn, Aine, and Cailleach, the three symbols of youth. Summer and winter are inseparable cycles. Today, Slievegullion is still a sacred place. Visitors there are often quiet, as if afraid of disturbing the sleep of the past. They spoke quietly, stepped lightly, and sometimes dropped a wildflower into the lake, in exchange for a tribute to the loved one and the deceased. And if you stand on that hill one night under the full moonlight, listen carefully. The wind can bring a whisper to your ear, not clear, but deep. Maybe it was the sigh of the moon fairy. Maybe it's the call of memory. Or simply, it's your heart beating for something that was once very real. And if you feel this story touching a part of your soul, click like, subscribe to the CogniTale channel, and share this story with those who love legends, fairy tales, and the beauty of the unexplained. Don't forget to ring the bell to watch the next stories, where the old and new worlds blend through every whisper. Wish you a peaceful sleep under the ancient moonlight where time sometimes slows down to listen.